Welcome, deep divers, to another fascinating journey here on the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a mission to unravel a really intriguing question. What makes Austria's people look so different? So let's jump right in. Try this. Close your eyes for a second. Picture an Austrian. What pops into your head? Is it maybe a tall, light-eyed Alpine hiker? Ash blonde hair, snowy peaks behind them. Or perhaps you see a dark-haired opera singer, sharp profile, maybe sipping coffee in a Vienna cafe. Could be a rugged farmer from Tyrol too, weather-faced. Or even a refined, sharp-cheeked diplomat in Salzburg. Okay, now open your eyes. Ask yourself, how can all of those images be right? It seems Austria's people just don't fit neatly into one box. Our mission today is to explore why. Why this incredible diversity isn't just like a coincidence, but actually a vivid, visible history lesson, written quite literally into their DNA.
That's a really powerful way to put it, a visible history lesson. And what's truly fascinating here is that Austria isn't just, a spot on the map. It has always been fundamentally a continental hinge, a real crossroads. It's a place where DNA traveled and mixed just as much as armies marched or empires expanded.
Right.
So this intense genetic mixing, it means the diversity we see in people's physical features across Austria isn't just anecdotal. It's something we can actually observe scientifically. We're going to zoom in on specific features today, things like eye color, face shape, to really get a handle on this rich, evolving tapestry that makes up the Austrian people.
I love that idea, living history book.
Yeah.
So maybe let's start with that big picture. Austria as a DNA crossroads. I mean, geographically, it sits right in the heart of Europe, doesn't it?
Exactly. Its location is absolutely key. Genetically speaking, Austria lies at the intersection of, well, at least 5 major ancestral streams. We're talking Germanic, Slavic, Roman, Celtic, and Balkan influences all converging there.
Wow, 5 streams.
Yeah, and historians, archaeologists, they've shown us that waves upon waves of people have moved across this land since way back, even before the Ice Age. Some settled, they thrived, others just passed through. But all of them left some kind of genetic mark, an indelible mark on the region.
And the genetic studies really back this up, don't they? I remember reading about those 2017 findings, showing significant genetic overlap with neighbors like Czechs, Hungarians, Southern Germans. But here's what really got me. They also carry these trace markers, small signals, linking back to Anatolia and the Near East. What's the thinking behind that? How did those get there?
It's incredible, isn't it? It speaks to really deep history. Scientists think these distant markers are probably tied to ancient trade routes. I mean, these were like bustling arteries connecting far-flung lands. And also, perhaps the historical influence of the Ottoman Empire, which, stretched its reach right into Central Europe for centuries.
Yeah.
So this broad, persistent genetic mixing, that's the fundamental reason why you can't really point to one single uniform average Austrian look. And honestly, that's just scratching the surface. Once we start looking at individual features, the picture gets even clearer and I think even more compelling.
Okay, speaking of those clear differences, let's zoom in on something pretty obvious. Eye color. If you, say, walk through Western Austria, places like Vorarlberg or Tyrol, you just notice it immediately. A striking number of blue and green eyes. That's not just perception, right?
No, absolutely. Not just perception. The genetic data actually shows something quite striking. Nearly 65% of Austrians have light-colored eyes, mostly blue.
65%. Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge figure. It dwarfs the maybe 15 to 20% you might see in Southern Europe, for example. And this high prevalence, it's largely down to specific gene clusters, mainly OCA2 and HARC2. Think them as genetic blueprints. These are commonly inherited from Northern and Central European ancestors. They're the genes often linked to lighter pigmentation in general. So this finding really shapes what many people might think of as Austrian, even before we look further east.
So, okay, the West is dominated by lighter eyes, but does that pattern hold up across the whole country, or does that crossroads nature of Austria mix things up as you move around?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's where the mosaic really comes into view. If you look at cities like Vienna or you head south into states like Carinthia and Styria, well, the presence of hazel and brown eyes starts to increase quite significantly.
Yeah, right.
And this isn't random. It's a direct result of centuries of interaction, centuries of intermarriage with Balkan peoples, Slavic peoples, Mediterranean peoples. You have to remember, Austria once governed this huge empire. It stretched into modern-day Croatia, Bosnia, northern Italy.
Yeah, Habsburgs.
Exactly. And as our sources often point out, eye color didn't just stop at the border post. People and their genes moved pretty freely within that whole massive area.
That context makes so much sense. Okay, so let's shift to hair color. That's often another strong clue about regional ancestry, and Austria definitely shows this too, right?
It certainly does. Take the Austrian Alps, for example. Those Germanic and Celtic roots, they often show up quite clearly in the commonness of light brown and blonde hair, sometimes with those reddish tints too. In fact, there are some interesting stats here. About 35% of Austrians under 30 say they have naturally blonde or dark blonde hair.
35%. That sounds high compared to neighbors.
It is. It's significantly higher than you'd find in, say, Hungary or Italy.
And yet, as we sort of trace that journey eastward in our minds, the palette shifts pretty dramatically, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The whole landscape of hair color transforms. In the eastern states, like Burgenland, and definitely within parts of Vienna with its diverse populations,
Yeah.
dark brown and black hair just become much more common. And it's not just color either. Hair texture tells a story too.
Really? How so?
Well, while you might find straight and fine hair is more dominant in the Alpine regions, you'll start to see slightly wavier textures cropping up in families with, say, Balkan or even Romani ancestry. It's often subtle, but it's consistently there. It's just another reminder, really, that borders, political or geographical, historically, haven't done much to stop biology and human connection from flowing across them.
Okay, so beyond eyes and hair, let's tackle something maybe even trickier. Facial structure. This seems to be where defining an Austrian look gets really tough and where people have the most debate. Is there actually a typical Austrian face?
Huh. Well, typical. Not really. Not in the sense of one single face you could point to and say, that's it.
Yeah.
But there are certainly patterns you can see, patterns that reflect those historical genetic streams we talked about. Anthropologists, for instance, they often describe people in Western Austria as tending to have broader faces, maybe more prominent cheekbones, sometimes deep-set eyes. It's what they might call a classic Alpine profile.
Alpine profile, right.
And these traits, they line up pretty well with the ancient Celtic and Germanic populations that were dominant in those mountain regions for so long.
But I know there's research, I think, from the University of Vienna that shows a different picture when you look eastwards. What did those studies find?
Exactly. That research highlights how Eastern Austrians often show narrower jaws, maybe sharper noses, more elongated skull shapes sometimes. And these features, again, likely reflect centuries of contact with Slavic peoples, Illyrian groups from the Balkans, and even going back further, populations influenced by Ottoman presence.
So it really depends where you are.
Precisely. Depending on where you stand in Austria, the face you might think of as typically Austrian could look quite Nordic or quite Balkan or indeed something completely in between. It's a real testament to that layered history.
And this diversity, especially in faces, it hasn't always been, let's say, celebrated, has it? History has some uncomfortable moments there.
That's a really crucial point and sometimes a difficult one. Nationalist groups, especially in the early 20th century, they absolutely did try to define and push this idea of an ideal Austrian type, often with very harmful discriminatory intentions.
Yeah.
However, modern genetic studies, particularly those done in the 2000s, have just made it crystal clear. There is no single pure Austrian phenotype. There's no one set of physical traits that defines all Austrians. Instead, what you have is this incredible diversity. And that diversity, as the sources really emphasize, is what makes Austria Austria. It's fundamentally part of its identity.
It's amazing how deep these influences run. So moving beyond faces and hair, even something like height and general body structure can tell a story about Austria's unique past and its geography.
They absolutely can. On average, Austrians are taller than the global average, though maybe not quite as tall as, say, the Dutch or Scandinavians. We have data from 2021 showing the average Austrian man at about 179 centimeters. That's roughly 5'10.5", and women averaging 166 centimeters, so 5'5.5".
That puts them pretty high up globally, right?
It does, among the top 25 tallest nations. And this is likely due to a combination of factors, favorable genetics, sure, but also generations of pretty high nutritional standards.
And do we see those regional influences popping up here too, like specifically thinking about people from the Alps again?
Yes, exactly. In those alpine areas, particularly among men, you do see a noticeable tendency towards a more, let's say, stocky build, broader shoulders, perhaps. This fits quite neatly with cold climate adaptation theories. The idea that these more mesomorphic, sort of muscular, robust body types are better at retaining heat and were historically suited for tough physical work in harsh environments.
Makes sense.
But then you contrast that with cities like Vienna or Linz. You've got people with much more mixed backgrounds, different urban lifestyles, and there you find a much wider range of body types, leaner, curvier, everything in between. So it's not a uniform picture at all, but each variation is like a traceable thread in Austria's biological story.
Okay, let's talk skin tone. Austria is often seen, statistically anyway, as a predominantly white country. But even within populations we label white, skin tone can actually vary quite a bit. What does the Austrian palette look like?
That's right. And researchers have found that Austrian skin pigmentation really does fall across a pretty broad spectrum. You'll definitely see very fair skin, what scientists call Fitzpatrick type I or 2, and that's particularly common in the mountainous regions, tying back to those northern central European roots. But as you move south or into the big urban centers, you start encountering more light olive tones, maybe type 3 skin. So even just within that white category, there's quite a range.
And I imagine it gets even more diverse if we look at specific communities within the country.
Absolutely. Austria also has distinct communities, often concentrated in cities with higher melanin retention. We're talking families with roots in, say, Romani communities, Turkey, the Balkans, North Africa. So while Austria might not have the same kind of large-scale racial diversity as maybe the US or the UK, it definitely possesses a surprising amount of phenotypic diversity, observable physical diversity within its overall population.
And that's causing discussion now.
It is. This very fact has even sparked some recent online debates. Should Austria update its national imagery? What does a typical Austrian even look like in the 21st century? It raises that important, very contemporary question. What happens when our cultural ideas about identity bump up against biological reality?
Which really brings us to the core question, maybe the deepest one, that comes out of all this. Does looking different mean being less Austrian? This feels like where the debate really heats up today.
That's where it gets truly complex, absolutely. Like many European nations, Austria has seen significant immigration waves in recent decades. People coming from Turkey, the Balkans, Syria, other places. And this has undeniably added new dimensions to Austria's physical diversity. And, well, it's fair to say that some traditionalists might express discomfort or uncertainty about this changing demographic picture.
But researchers make a really vital point about Austria's history here, don't they? That this diversity isn't actually some brand new thing.
Not at all. It's crucial. They strongly emphasize that even pre-modern Austria was never phenotypically pure in any meaningful way. Just think about the Habsburg Empire again. It ruled Central Europe for centuries and was arguably one of the most diverse political entities in European history. It covered so many different peoples, languages, cultures.
Right, it was huge and varied.
Exactly. So the diverse faces you see today in Vienna or Graz or anywhere else, they aren't really an anomaly or some sudden exception. In many ways, they're simply a continuation of Austria's long, very rich, and profoundly mixed history. So if we try to connect all these threads, step back for the big picture, what makes Austrians look so different? It's clearly so much more than just genes, isn't it? It's the geography being at that crossroads. It's centuries of history, conflict, migration. It's the legacy of empires alongside the quiet persistence of village life, the mountains shaping people one way, the bustling marketplaces mixing them another. It's really the constant, undeniable flow of human movement that has shaped both the physical land and the people living on it for thousands of years.
And ultimately, it points to that powerful reality that identity itself isn't fixed, is it? It's fluid. And maybe our looks are less about fitting into neat little boxes and much more about the incredibly complex, winding paths our ancestors took across continents and through history. Austria, it seems, wears this complicated history right on its face, beautifully, diversely, and, well, unapologetically. So thinking about all this, what does it mean for you listening out there? Have you ever noticed how people from different regions within your own country maybe can look strikingly different, perhaps in ways you hadn't really considered before? Or maybe a bigger question. Given everything we've talked about today, this deep history of mixing, do you think national identity should still be tied to physical appearance in any way, even implicitly?
Yeah, this Austrian example really makes you think, doesn't it? How do societies grapple with this evolving tapestry of identity? Especially when physical appearance has, historically, so often been used, sometimes quite deliberately, to decide who belongs and who doesn't. Perhaps the beauty of human genetic diversity is that it's this living, breathing record of our interconnected past. And maybe it's an open invitation for us to embrace the richness of our present and our shared future.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We always look forward to hearing your thoughts.